I've worked the graveyard shift at the Turnpike toll booth for 4 years. It's a lonely stretch of highway, buried deep in the Pine Barrens, 40 miles from the nearest rest stop. Most nights, I see maybe 10 cars between midnight and dawn. Tonight was different. Tonight, a massive front rolled in from the coast. The rain wasn't just falling, it was being driven sideways by 50-mile-an-hour gusts. The storm was so violent it knocked out the overhead highway lights for a 3-mile stretch. My booth was the only source of light in a sea of absolute, crushing blackness. It was 3:14 a.m. The rain hammered against the metal roof of the booth like a drumline. I was sipping stale coffee, listening to the static hiss of the AM radio when I saw the headlights. They were faint, cutting through the torrential downpour. They were moving incredibly slow, too slow for the highway. As the vehicle crept closer, it drifted between lanes, meandering like a ghost ship lost at sea. Finally, it pulled into my lane. It was a station wagon, late 80s, maybe early 90s. The paint was dull, rusted around the wheel wells, and the headlights were dim and yellow. The engine didn't sound right. It idled with a heavy, irregular sputter that sent tremors through the heavy rain. I slid the glass window open. The cold wind whipped inside, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and something else. Something like old ozone and copper. "That'll be $3.50, I said, leaning out slightly. The driver's side window began to roll down. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was manual, the mechanism grinding in protest. I expected a tired trucker, a lost family, or a drunk driver. But the man behind the wheel was completely obscured in shadow. He wore a heavy, dark coat, the collar pulled up high. He didn't speak. He didn't move to hand me money. He just sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Sir, $3.50, I repeated, my voice tight. He didn't move, but from the back seat a voice spoke. "Please let us in." It wasn't a child's voice. Well, it was, but it was entirely devoid of emotion. It sounded flat, monotone, like a recording played slightly too slow. I leaned forward, trying to see past the driver. 2 children sat in the back, a boy and a girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old. They wore clothes that looked too thin for the weather, faded summer dresses and a thin button-down shirt. They were pale, pasty white, like they hadn't seen the sun in months. But it was their eyes that stopped my heart. There was no white, no iris, just absolute pitch-black voids, like staring into a deep well at midnight. The fluorescent light from my booth didn't reflect in them. The eyes just absorbed the light. "Please let us in," the boy repeated. His lips barely moved. "We are very cold." "Where are your parents?" I asked, my hand instinctively dropping to the heavy metal lock on the booth door. "He is driving," the girl said, her voice identical in pitch and cadence to the boy's. "But he cannot open the door. You have to open the door." I looked back at the driver. He still hadn't moved. He hadn't even blinked. In fact, I couldn't see his chest rising. He wasn't breathing. The panic hit me then. A primal, suffocating wave of terror that told me, in no uncertain terms, that I was looking at apex predators. I can't let you in," I stammered, my hand gripping the lock. "This is a secure facility. I can call someone for you." "We don't need someone," the boy said. Both children leaned forward simultaneously. They pressed their pale faces against the glass of the rear window. "We need you to open the door. It is so very cold." And then I felt it. A heavy, crushing pressure in my skull. A compulsion. It felt as if a thick fog was rolling into my brain, dulling my fear, dulling my instincts. My hand tightened on the deadbolt. My fingers began to turn the metal latch. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But it was like my arm belonged to someone else. Clunk. The deadbolt slid back. The lock was disengaged. The children smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a predatory stretching of the lips, revealing teeth that seemed too small, too sharp. "Thank you," they said in unison. I reached for the handle. My mind was screaming, begging my body to stop, but I couldn't. I was a passenger in my own flesh. Suddenly, the radio behind me erupted. BZZT. A massive burst of loud, violent static shattered the silence of the booth. The emergency broadcast system alarm shrieked at maximum volume. a piercing, mechanical squeal that cut through the fog in my brain like a razor. I gasped, ripping my hand away from the door handle as if I'd been burned. I stumbled backward, crashing into the stool. The trance was broken. I looked up. The children's smiles had vanished. Their black eyes narrowed, a flash of pure, inhuman hatred contorting their pale faces. Before I could move, before I could hit the panic button, the driver slammed his foot on the gas. The station wagon's engine roared. The tires spun on the wet asphalt, sending a spray of dirty water against the glass of my booth. The car didn't wait for the toll gate. It smashed straight through the wooden barricade, snapping it like a twig. I watched the red taillights disappear into the absolute darkness of the storm. I locked the deadbolt. I pushed the heavy metal safe against the door. I sat on the floor of the booth, shaking violently until the sun came up. I didn't report the broken gate. I told my supervisor a truck must have hit it while I was in the bathroom. I quit that afternoon. I live in the city now. I live on the 7th floor of a secure apartment building. I don't drive at night. I don't answer my door after dark. And whenever it rains, I close all the blinds. Because sometimes when the thunder rolls, I can still hear the squeak of a manual window rolling down. And I know that out there in the dark, they are still waiting for someone to let them in.